I didn't cry. I didn't throw things around. I didn't write an angry letter. I just silently closed my laptop. Something died inside me that day, and something else was born. My name is Hannah. I am 37. On Monday, my boss stole 2 tickets to an Adele concert that I had won fair and square in an internal raffle for top performers who exceeded their annual targets. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I won. My name was among those announced. They even sent me an email confirmation, and 3 hours later, the tickets were suddenly reissued to his wife and daughter. No explanation. No apology. "You're not a fan anyway, Hannah," he said with a smile. "They need it more." I laughed in response, because I didn't know what else to do. My mouth laughed. My eyes didn't. Something shifted inside me. Not anger. No. Something quieter. Darker. Like the moment when water turns to ice. Imperceptibly. But forever. It wasn't about the tickets. It wasn't about Adele. It was about the fact that I hadn't been seen all this time. Not heard. Not counted. I worked without sick days. I covered for other people's projects. I kept secrets about shortages, about lies to clients, about report adjustments that no one wanted to check. I thought someone would notice me someday. But I wasn't an employee. I was a function, a knot that tightened when the system creaked. After the tickets, I realized, enough is enough. But I didn't quit. I didn't make a scene. I just made a backup copy of all my emails. And then I walked into the office and smiled. He thought he had ruined my evening. In reality, he gave me a reason. I opened my eyes. If you remain silent for years, it doesn't mean you haven't been observing. It means you've been memorizing everything. Especially the faces that laughed at you. I sat in silence. With a cup of coffee I made myself, because we have junior staff, right, Hannah? Craig Meller, my boss, likes to joke that his intuition about people has never failed him. But it did fail him. He didn't notice that I had kept copies of all his emails, that I had access to folders that, according to him, nobody cares about because they're boring. But I'm an accountant. I'm not interested in drama. I'm interested in numbers, and in them, I see blood. Everything is clear. Over the past 3 years, the same pattern has been repeated in the reports. The same subcontractor, the same address, different names. This is money laundering. I knew it, but I kept quiet, because I was taught that loyalty is above ambition. But now, loyalty is dead, along with those tickets. I started to create a map, not in a file, in my head. I knew who was covering for Craig, his right-hand man, Stephen, the one who has a company named after his wife. I knew who was getting bonuses for projects that were never completed, and who was signing documents instead of others. I wasn't going to be the one to expose the scheme. I was going to be the one who made them lose everything, suddenly, publicly, with no chance to defend themselves. I didn't have a journalist friend. I didn't have connections at the SEC, but I had something they didn't, a conscience and patience. In the evening, I went to the office on the 23rd floor, turned off the lights, sat down at the computer, and ran a macro that tracked the movement of funds to a separate log. I saved it on a flash drive. I named it simply Monday. I didn't plan to destroy an empire. I just wanted one man to understand. I am not silent. I am an echo. Revenge is not an emotion. It's a system. And mine is already working. I sat in front of my laptop, already at home, no makeup, hair down, kettle on the stove. The person I was during the day, a corporate shadow, had nothing to do with the person now clicking away at the keyboard. I was quiet, but not stupid. The first account I chose was from 2019. Amount, $847,000. Company, Brinfield Contractors, LLC. Project, IT Server Logistics Optimization. Reality? An unregistered room on the outskirts of New Jersey with a phone number that doesn't work. Signed, Craig Meller. I found the external email address of the auditing firm, which, ironically, Craig himself had presented in the annual report. I attached the PDF extract, ran it through a VPN, encrypted it in a zip file, and wrote only one thing in the body of the email. Start with this. Was it legal? Not entirely. Was it dangerous? Without a doubt. But Craig had opened the game. I just put my chips on the table. The next morning, something began on Slack that corporate jargon refers to as activation of external review procedures. Translation? Someone got the email, someone freaked out, and someone started covering their tracks. I watched. Stephen, Craig's right-hand man, suddenly sent out a request to change contractors for old unprocessed contracts. That was the first move. The second? An urgent request for legal consulting from a firm that Fairview only calls when things are on fire. The third? Half an hour of silence in Meller's office. The door closed. Then, he came out smiling as usual. But there was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Emptiness. And me? I drank tea and pretended to work on the weekly budget. He doesn't know who threw the stone, but he already knows. The water is no longer standing still. It wasn't a blow. It was a rustle. But in the silence of the office, a rustle can become an earthquake. The next day, I noticed that the coffee machine had stopped working. I know how that sounds, but in our office, the coffee machine is the center of power. It's where people go to hear the latest gossip. It's where people go to gauge the mood of management. It's where conspiracies are hatched, alliances are formed, and desperate attempts are made to diffuse client failures. And now, silence. Real, suffocating silence. No one is laughing. No one is making eye contact. And there was something familiar about this silence. Fear. Craig walked faster than usual. His jacket was wrinkled. And on Thursday, he did something strange. He approached me. A real approach. He smiled. He asked, "How are you doing?" "Fine," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. And this time, I didn't look away. His smile disappeared for a millisecond, but that was enough. That same day, a new player appeared, Sarah Wenton. She introduced herself as a legal advisor for external contracts, but her badge didn't have the company logo, and her laptop was encrypted. I saw her go into the meeting room. Behind her, Stephen, another partner, and Craig. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see the gestures. Craig wasn't the boss. He was the client. Sarah was leading the conversation, and she wasn't smiling. Meanwhile, I was already preparing the next file. This time, it was internal correspondence from 2021. I'd saved it back when I felt that something was off. It was about a so-called IT budget expansion of $2.4 million, but attached was a scan of an invoice for landscaping at a private golf club. Where should I send it? I hadn't decided yet, but I already knew who needed to know about it, and it definitely wasn't Craig. I also started noticing glances. Glances at me. Once in the conference room window. Another time, when I opened my desk drawer and found that someone had moved my personal belongings around. It was as if someone was trying to say, "We know." But no one said it directly. And, interestingly, it was this silence. That made me sure. They were afraid. And I was no longer just a secretary with a bottomless cup of coffee. I was a variable that couldn't be controlled. I was no longer playing by their rules. I was building my own board, and the pieces were already moving. There comes a moment when the silence around you is no longer about peace. It's about fear, and those who remain silent begin to seem dangerous. Sarah Wenton formally introduced herself as a legal advisor on external contracts, but her appearance had a completely different energy. This was not an interview, not a review. This was an inspection. She didn't have a badge, but she had her own room, a meeting room, which she made her own, without asking. She didn't ask questions. She didn't smile. She didn't joke. She just watched. And that was enough to make many people very uncomfortable. She took over the room silently, without permission. And from the way she looked at people, even the most confident managers began to choose their words carefully. She didn't need to ask. She made it clear, you are under scrutiny. I had lived in this company like I was in armor, quiet, useful, reliable. Now, my silence was different. My silence no longer asked for peace. It was waiting to explode. At 3:42 p.m., Slack. Come in when you're done with your tasks. I sat up straight, pretended I hadn't seen it. 3:44, another message. Seriously, this is important. Now I was curious. How important could it be? I closed my laptop, walked over to his door. I knocked. No smile, no expectations. He was sitting in the dark, under dim lighting, blinds down, laptop open. His face showed something like fatigue, but it wasn't that. It was fear, masked by experience. Is that you, Hanno? He asked, almost in a whisper. Tell me I'm wrong. I was silent. His eyes were on the screen. There was part of the same file I had sent to Holdwell, but not in the same form. Someone had changed the markings. Someone had passed it on. And now, Craig could see it. I know it's you, he said. His voice, dry, no threats. But his eyes were shining. And I know why, but you don't understand what you're getting yourself into. I remained silent. I can still stop this, he said. Everything will disappear. No investigations. You'll get compensation, a clean slate. He paused. Just say we can work something out. I looked at him, as if for the first time. How did we work something out? About the Adele tickets? He flinched. I didn't scream. I said it, almost tenderly. And it was that tenderness that destroyed him more than any scream could have. I didn't want to, he began. But you did. Those few words were the edge of the abyss, and Craig realized I was no longer the person who had once sat in the shadows. I left the office without closing the door behind me, and in his eyes, I saw something new. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do next. And for the first time, I realized the game didn't start when I pressed send. It started when I stopped being afraid. At 10 o'clock, Tuesday morning, a message flashed across Slack. Sudden check of computers for suspicious activity. It requests cooperation. Whoever wrote it tried to keep the tone official, almost indifferent. But I saw it. The font had been changed manually. Someone was nervous. My laptop wasn't clean. I knew it. Even with all the VPNs, the anonymizers, the fake email addresses, I knew that if they wanted to find me, they could. But that didn't mean they could use it. Everything that could break me was distributed. 3 flash drives, 3 different locations, 3 different people, and each one came with instructions. At 12:03 p.m., a message hit my corporate inbox. New security protocol for the finance department. Formally, it was for everyone, but I knew. It was for me. The door to my office creaked. Sarah stood in the hallway, speechless. We looked at each other. Seconds. Nothing said. Then, "Do you have a minute?" In the conference room, she opened her laptop, turned on the voice recorder, the official one, built into the security system. She said, "We've received a report of a possible leak of confidential information. I am here to have a formal conversation, outside of management. For now." I shrugged. If I have something to say, I'll say it, when I want to those I deem necessary. My words were cold. So was her reaction. She nodded, turned off the recording. "You're not the first to try to hack the system," she said, quietly, "but few make it to the second wave." She left, and I felt my pulse pounding in my neck. That evening, at home, I opened the red box, my backup archive. Inside was a file I'd been saving for the darkest day. It held a list of shell companies created by Craig and his lawyers for temporary kickbacks. One of them had an address linked to an offshore company, which, as I discovered a month earlier, was financing the party committee. I packed up the file, and this time, I didn't send it to the audit department. I sent it to a journalist, Leslie Willing. She writes about financial crimes, at the government level. 20 minutes later, I received a text message. "We see you. Say stop if you want to live in peace." No signature, no number, just a fact. I turned off my phone and put the kettle on for tea. Everything broke at 6:47 a.m. Silence was no longer a shield. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. The message read, "The second wave has begun. Don't stop." I didn't know who it was. Not Finch, not Leslie, not even the mysterious contact in Houston who'd received the first file. And definitely not Craig. He doesn't use periods. He's too self-absorbed to hide his style. But someone was watching. Someone was watching my every move. And it looked like someone was playing a game. The tension in the office was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sarah Wenton, temporary consultant, suddenly appeared on the floor with a laptop and her own coffee in a logo-free thermos. She looked like she was prepared for cameras, microphones, inspections. She didn't speak to me directly, but she looked at me, the way people look when they already know everything and are just waiting for you to confirm their suspicions. Craig sent 2 letters. One, official. Informational meeting with a consultant. The other, private. No subject line. "Hannah, don't do this. It won't end well." I didn't reply. Instead, I went into the women's room, took the flash drive from my coat pocket, plugged it into my laptop. 2 more files. One, invoices from the legal department for training. That was actually funding a political campaign in Florida. The second, a letter from Craig to the CEO. Her time is up. I wasn't afraid. I was quiet, but no longer silent. Leslie Willing, cautious on the first call, confident by the second. But after the third, when I said Sarah Wenton's name, she went silent, and then, "I'll publish it, but you should know, they're already moving, and not just legally." Next came the meeting, with Sarah. I brought no notebook, no phone, just the face of someone who is not afraid of anything, even if that's not entirely true. Sarah was already seated. She didn't stand, didn't extend her hand, she just nodded. On the table, an open laptop, a notebook with a black comb, a pen, no logo. A cup of coffee with a paper ring. Her name printed in block letters, like an ID tag. "Miss Lawson," she said, no intonation. "We're in a hurry. This is a standard conversation." "Then I'll be quick." I sat down, straight, no crossed arms. She nodded. Didn't start with questions. She, read, from her notebook. Sentences, one after another, each one like a knife. May 2021, unapproved expenses in Delta Shore reports. October 2022, conflict of interest in coastal trust contract. January 2023, signature from your account on a document that does not exist, in the archive. I was silent. Her eyes didn't ask for explanations. They already had the answers. "Do you know anything about these facts?" she asked. "Do you?" Craig was silent beside me, in the room, but not in the conversation. He clenched his jaw when I didn't look away. The meeting lasted exactly 11 minutes. When I got up, Sarah just said, "Thank you, that's all I need." She left first, but didn't close the door. She never closes the door. I knew that for sure, now. That evening, when I left the office, the light in Craig's office was still on, but he wasn't looking out the window. He was on the phone, his face, pale, forehead, covered in sweat. He didn't see me, but I think he sensed me. And at that moment, I realized I was much closer to their fear than they ever thought. The next morning, there was a note waiting in my desk drawer. No signature, just 5 words. "You don't know all the names." The note was waiting, in the drawer. 5 words, no date, no signature, but with a meaning, that cut to the bone. "You don't know all the names." I held it for a few minutes, not blinking. Then, I put it in my pocket like a weapon. I didn't need to know who left it. It was enough to know I was no longer alone, or at least, that someone else was playing. Leslie from the Tribune wrote late that evening, "You're not exaggerating. Everything's been verified. Publication is on Monday. At 8 a.m., get ready." Get ready. Ready for what? To go on stage? To go to court? To face a threat? I didn't know, but I cleared out my office that same day. All personal belongings gone, except for one mug, white, with the words, "I'm fine." I left it there, on purpose. Sarah went and approached me during lunch. No emotion, just a statement. "If you're smart, you'll disappear." I didn't answer. She smiled. "But it's not about being smart anymore, is it? It's about principle." Her words stuck, and part of me knew she was right. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was payback for years of invisibility, for every "just wait a little longer," every "they'll notice you eventually," for the Adele tickets, and for being forced to apologize when I cried in the bathroom. That evening, another message, unknown account, no name. "The Shore Project funding isn't the last. Look into the Coastal Trust, and be ready. They're preparing a rebuttal." Coastal Trust, another clue, another shell company, more proof that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm no longer standing on the shore. I'm swimming, straight out. And just when I thought I had everything under control, my phone rang. Unknown number. The voice on the other end said, "Miss Lawson, you can come to the hearing, or we'll come to you." The biggest trap is when you think you've won. In reality, it's just a change of scene. And the players? They change faster than you can figure out. Who's who? I was sitting in the conference room where I had been summoned for a formal discussion. Craig wasn't there, not Sarah. A completely new face, a company lawyer, and next to him, a person with a badge that read, Coastal Trust Limited. Miss Lawson, the lawyer said, we are conducting an internal investigation. We ask that you refrain from further dissemination of internal information. The tone was polite, too polite, like a threatening letter from a bank. No shouting, no accusations. But I had heard it before, in the office, when I was asked to rewrite the report because it didn't match the narrative. I looked at both of them and said, nothing. Silence kills more than the best comeback, and I knew that. After the meeting, I received another letter, this time from Leslie. The publication has been suspended. Temporarily, the publisher is being threatened with legal action. I expected this, so I sent a copy of the materials to 2 other editors, 2 public organizations, and 1 more person whose name I will never reveal, not even to myself. The system began to tighten around me, and I could feel it, physically. A camera in the elevator that I hadn't noticed before, my badge, stopped working the first time I used it. A random request from it to check my computer. And then I did what they feared most. I recorded a video. No filters, no makeup, no names, but facts. I talked about 6 years of silence, about missing transactions, phantom projects, and about how my boss took my Adele tickets as a first step. This story is not about concerts, I said. It's a story about power. That is confident you'll remain silent. But I won't. And when I clicked publish, the screen froze. Then, your video violates community guidelines. It has been removed. But I was already live, and I couldn't be removed. Now, everything depended on my last move. I was warned. This isn't your war. But I never asked for it to be mine. I just couldn't be an extra in a play written by others anymore. I reposted the deleted video on an anonymous YouTube account under a different name. Then on Vimeo, Telegram, Reddit, Twitter. That night, I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't breathe, but the video got out. The first to respond was my former colleague, Jason, the one who always kept quiet. I confirm her words, he wrote. I also saw the Delta Shore schemes. Here's my correspondence with Craig, where he asks to transfer the money from the account, and don't ask any questions. Then, Leslie. Her site had been hacked, but she managed to upload the archive to an independent platform, with one line. This is not about one company. This is about a system where honesty is called naivety. In the morning, I went to the hearing. Federal District Courtroom, 9th floor. Soft carpet, air conditioning, deliberately aimed at my face. I sat across from Fairview's legal counsel. Craig was there, in a dark blue suit, hands clasped, for the first time ever. Sarah Wenton was to his right, face set, like a mask. Miss Lawson, Judge Foster said, peering through his glasses. Do you confirm that the documents were sent to journalist Leslie Willing from your work account? I confirm that these documents exist, I said, and that the public has a right to see them. The company's lawyer jumped in. Objection, Your Honor. That is an emotional assessment, not an answer. Objection overruled, the judge said. Curt, final. He flipped through the file, pressed a button on his mic. In the case of Lawson v. Fairview Group, the hearing will continue next week, but first, I would like to point out that the digital evidence is not falsified, and IP logging confirms the authenticity of the source. The walls didn't creak, but I could feel them shaking through the entire structure of the company. They thought they could control it, that I would break before the system did. They miscalculated. That same day, dozens of people sent screenshots, documents, letters, similar cases, other companies, domino, effect. 72 hours after the hearing, CNN, interview marked informant, my silhouette, my voice, altered. But one phrase, left unchanged. It started with concert tickets, but every revolution starts with something small. I don't know how long this fight will last, but I know one thing. I am no longer alone.